Gene Dawson is an out of nowhere artist that I hadn't really been paying attention to, but it seems as though that my attention should have been on this artist because I really, really like this album. I like it when you've heard a name thrown around, you don't really know much about them, but you've definitely recognized like an album cover, and then eventually you're like, oh, let's give it a go, and you listen to it and you really enjoy it. This is essentially like 2020's version of George Clanton's Slide. It was an album that I remember being, thrown around. Some music critics shone a light on it. Didn't really check it out. As soon as I heard it, I fell in love with it, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is a big one. And similarly to that album, in a weird way, it sort of got that like indie, free-spirited feel to it that you would only find through digging into all kinds of places through the internet to find all kinds of different music. Obviously, they don't sound the same, but they have a similar aesthetically pleasing outlook on how they produce their music, how they put together their music. And it's always something I really appreciate. Gene Dawson's vocals from start to finish carry bags of personality. There are times where I'm reminded of an amalgamation of different artists. And I know sometimes reviews can be bogged down with this sounds like this, or he sounds like this artist, or this song reminds me of this, which I know I do sometimes, but I think with an artist like Gene Dawson, it's working in his favor more than anything else that he is reminding me of plenty of other artists, because I think it's helping shape the type of artist he is. The opening track, for example, I don't know if it is exactly inspired by Young Fathers, but my God, does it carry the same energy and the same qualities that Young Fathers has been giving us since like 2013, which can only be a great thing, by the way, considering how much I've liked Young Fathers since the early days of their output. But this kind of like young spirited energy coming through on this track is so damn great, and it makes for such a good opener too. There's a rebelliousness to Gene Dawson's attitude, while also not being too in your face. There are moments on this album where his delivery actually reminds me of JPEG Mafia, but he's not as like harsh, or he's not as, in your face, slapping you with so many like offensive terms like Peggy would on one of his tracks, particularly on Veteran. Shiner is totally reminiscent of the way Peggy delivers his bars. I'm not sure if I'm the first person to hear this, but like it's so eerily similar, and I like the beat on this track too. It has quite a power behind it, and again, it might remind me of some other artists, but I think, my history with Peggy wasn't great with Veteran, so obviously this is working for me, whereas it didn't back then. 06 Burst has this experimental approach to it compared to the other tracks. Like the beat is completely different. You would totally hear this on some kind of like experimental rap release, which is weird because so many of these tracks don't sound like this at all. And I like the way Gene is playing with ideas here, because it doesn't fit the album, but it also, once again, fits that kind of like rebellious nature, the kind of, I'll do whatever I want, it's my album, I'm going to try all kinds of different things, and I don't really care what you think. It totally works as well. I think it sounds great. I think it's a bit weird to begin with, because again, it's a bit weirdly placed, but once you kind of dig into it and realize that, this style that he's attempting here does sound really cool, you just get used to it. And once again, adding to the constantly stirring pot of ideas that Gene is pulling from all kinds of different artists, all kinds of different genres, all into one album. Policia is once again reminding me of Young Fathers, just the way that the instrumental progresses, and it's constantly like fiery and upbeat. Totally reminds me of what they do. And also, this track definitely takes a bit more of like a politically charged approach. He does mention on one of the tracks as well that like he doesn't fuck with feds, but this track is way more like overtly political in the sense that it is about this negative angle or negative perception of the police. And I will say that you could definitely touch up the lyrics here. It seems a bit basic in the way that it's framed. Nothing you've never heard before, not exactly like a perspective that will blow you away. But I don't really think it needs to do that. I think the message is pretty clear. And not only that, I think the track just sounds great enough in its own right anyway. And maybe in the future, as Gene matures and gets a bit older, perhaps some of these lyrical themes could be tidied up and we could get more interesting tracks through that. The triple double track with A$AP Rocky is great as well. Love the atmosphere of this track. I love the way A$AP's verse comes through as well. The kind of like effects that are being put on his voice that kind of makes him sound like he's in another room or he's echoing. It's a cool little motif that's used. Reminds me of something that Tyler the Creator would do. Again, throwing out all these different names, but it totally does sound like something that would fit onto a Tyler the Creator album with an A$AP Rocky feature too. It just lines up perfectly because they are, forever putting tracks out together and have been for years now. So it just totally lines up really well. Bruiseboy, my god, love this chorus. Definitely one of the best choruses on this album, and that's saying something because so many of the hooks are fantastic across this thing anyway. They get stuck in my head for ages, like they really do. Sort of gets me thinking about Brockhampton, this track, mostly in the energy, but the way the track is crafted and then the vocals that come through, the way they shine through the way they do, in such a great way, in such a euphoric feel to how they come through too. A few moments on this album too definitely remind me of that, and I think it just takes me back to like 2017, where I was mostly falling in love with so many of the songs that Brockhampton were putting out. I feel like this album overall just gives me that sense of feeling too. Reminds me of feeling young, I guess, which is a bit lame to say, but there is something about this album that does get you in that mindset. And I love the way that Gene pulls out those emotions from me as a listener, and those feelings, those nostalgic feelings of, when you're at your youngest peak, I guess you could say. In terms of negatives though, I guess I would say that the transition in Pegasus is really weak. Like that weird, druggy, atmospheric vocal tone comes through completely out of nowhere. It's like a new song starts. And I've been pretty open in the past about those kind of like weird modulated vocals that are used by artists such as Brockhampton actually, and I'm never the biggest fan, so it's probably no surprise to you as a viewer that I would say that this is a pretty weak moment. But not only that, but the lyrics that come through on that part as well are just trash, man. Like another moment where I feel like the lyrics could be touched up. Not that Gene is like the best songwriter out there anyway, but I guess a bit of maturity in some aspects could do this album a bit of good. Pyrotechnics is actually a relatively weak closer considering how good so much of the album is. I don't know if it was the best way to end the album, honestly. I don't know, it's not a bad track at all. It's just fine. Like it's a fine song, but like all the tracks prior to it, or pretty much most of the tracks, are so damn great. So it's a bit of a weird way to end the album on it's alright. I feel like the way it ends with the lyrics, watching Earth explode, just reminds me like I'm finishing a coming of age film, which I'm never usually a big fan of. I think they're usually very American centric, so they don't really appeal to a UK viewer as much as they would an American viewer really. I just could totally imagine like a character at the end of the film, the sun's setting, and he's with the girl that he finally gets to fall in love with, and she loves him back. And he's like, let's just watch the Earth explode. And she's like, oh yeah, let's do that. It's a very specific thing, and you're probably thinking, what the hell are you talking about, Ryan? But it just totally gets me thinking of that for some reason. But at least it makes me chuckle. So the final moments of this album get a chuckle out of me. And I can't exactly say that's a terrible thing. But you know what? Regardless of that, I think this album's great. I find it just so much fun. Like I've been playing this a lot for the past few days, and every time I put it on, I just get this sense of like, this is just exactly what I need in this moment right now. It's a different kind of fun that I get from listening to, the Come and Have a Go album, which I've praised a lot this year. They're different types of fun, and I like that I can put both of these albums on and get very different experiences from them, but they're equally as fantastic to listen to. 8 out of 10, one of my favourite releases of the year, and I'm glad I got to it before, you know, the year-end list season and all that, because that's creeping upon us. That is creeping upon us. And Gene Dawson is definitely worthy of landing on my list. So hopefully you've liked this album as much as I have too. If you've watched? You haven't watched, but have you listened to it? That's what I was meant to say. Have you listened to this album? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this review. Hopefully you like this as much as I do as well. Shout out to Buffalo Staple too. He's been talking about this album a lot over the past few days. It definitely piques my interest with him talking about it. And that's what I love about the music community, man. We all just come together, share music, and it leads to this. It leads to an 8 out of 10 video. So I can't complain. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. And yes, goodbye. Goodbye.